Hi, everyone. Today, we are going to finish up the endocrine system. This is going to be really short, just a quick lesson to end the endocrine system. And when we finished up yesterday, we talked about how hormones can have multiple effects. So we learned that the same hormone can have different effects on target cells, and that's because they might have slightly different receptors or they might have a different signal transduction pathway, which really means a different number of hormones, proteins inside the cell. So here are the two pictures showing that. So we've got different cellular responses happening in these two cells, and it's because they're two different types of cells. They both have the same beta receptor, but the transduction pathway inside the cell is going to be different, resulting in a different outcome. And here we have two of the same similar types of cells, blood vessels, in different places, but they have different receptors. These have beta receptors and these have alpha receptors. Although the beta and the alpha receptor are going to be very similar, that difference is going to cause a different signal transduction pathway, which is going to cause two different responses. Hormones have powerful effects, and thus we need to control them. So feedback is going to play a big role in this body system. Most hormones are controlled by negative feedback. Negative feedback, you should be thinking about maintaining homeostasis. Negative feedback is all about making sure things are right on the same level. Things get too high, negative feedback pushes them down low. Things get too low, negative feedback tries to push them back up. Positive feedback is also found, although it's different. Positive feedback is when we amplify a response, so we make the response get bigger. In effect, we're sort of defying homeostasis. We are doing something to make a bigger and bigger and bigger response. An example that we're going to talk about is the oxytocin secretion, which causes contractions during childbirth, and it also controls lactation. So here is an example of a positive feedback pathway. So what happens is that after birth and after delivery, oxytocin is released, and oxytocin is going to get the milk glands going. So as the milk glands are working, the newborn is going to start to suckle. So it's going to start to feed, and it's going to ingest the milk that is produced. Now, nerves know that this is happening, right? The pressure on the tissue is going to be felt by the nerves. So the nerves are going to send an impulse back to the hypothalamus. This is part of your brain. And the hypothalamus then is going to say, okay, we have an infant feeding. We need more oxytocin. More oxytocin is going to be released, which is then going to cause the milk glands to produce and squeeze out more milk, which is then going to increase feeding. So we have this positive feedback. It's amplified over time. A little bit of milk is produced, and as feeding continues, more and more and more milk is produced. So note here that this is an amplification response. Does this involve homeostasis? Not really, right? Because the response is getting bigger over time. This is positive feedback when one response stimulates another response to go further. We're going to skip ahead to talk about negative feedback. So negative feedback is also really important because it's so common. We've talked about negative feedback mechanisms before, so this shouldn't be too new. But basically imagine that your hypothalamus is going to produce a hormone that is going to signal to your anterior pituitary. Your anterior pituitary, which is still part of your brain, is going to signal to a particular endocrine gland, which is then going to produce a signal that is going to be a hormone. So your brain is ultimately starting this pathway that's leading to the production of hormones. As the amount of hormone gets higher and higher, the hormone itself is going to inhibit the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus from operating, effectively shutting off its own production, right? And as the hormone levels go down, they inhibit less, And so since we have less inhibition, your hypothalamus is going to get back to work, making more of the signals that produce the hormone. This is negative feedback. So it is regulating itself. And we can see an example here of something that would come from the hypothalamus, making thyroxine, which is going to regulate itself at the hypothalamic and anterior pituitary level. And during lab, we're going to look at some examples of feedback and how our endocrine system is related to feedback. All right, that's all for this one. I will, that really ends the endocrine system. There's going to be another one after this on animals, so stay tuned for that one.